Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California is California's original theme park, and it is absolutely awesome. It's a perfect merge between roller coasters and thrill rides and theming. This Cedar Fair park is located just a couple of minutes down the road from Disneyland and all the other major Southern California theme parks, well outside of Magic Mountain, making it a great stop while you're in the area. Especially because you can do most, if not all the things you want to do in one day. And trust me, there are a lot of fun things to do. But before we get into the park, it should be noted that there is a marketplace outside of Knott's Berry Farm, kind of like a mini downtown Disney. There are some places where you can learn about the park's history, and there are just some fun shops in there. I definitely recommend stopping by if you have time. I visited the park twice, once in August of 2021 and the other in May of 2022, and in 2021 we were able to hop into the marketplace, which was pretty fun. It kind of gives you an introduction to Knott's Berry Farm, so to speak, and located in this marketplace is the legendary Chicken Dinner restaurant. Whether you like the food or not is debatable, but what isn't debatable is how much of a classic this restaurant is. This is where the park began. And while this particular type of food isn't my forte, I still really appreciated sitting in the restaurant and knowing the history behind it, and I know a lot of people who really do like going here, and I do recommend going to this restaurant, no doubt. And it's easy to pop into some of the shops while you're there going to the restaurant as well. You also can't exclude the attached Soak City water park. Okay, but who cares about shopping and food, right? You're here for Knott's Berry Farm, so let's get into the park itself. Tickets to the park I think are very reasonable. They cost at least $30 less than Disneyland tickets, which I think is quite good. What I don't think is quite good from a pricing perspective is the fast lane. The fast lane can be very helpful, more on that in a minute. However, it is expensive. It's more expensive than your park ticket. With that being said, if you're going on a busy summer day, I think I have to recommend it, because this way you can get re-rides on all the major coasters, and the fast lane is pretty much on all the best rides at the park. So if you splurge for it, it can reward you. It may be difficult getting on all the rides you want to get on a busy day if you don't have fast lane, especially with how long of a line Ghost Rider gets. Ghost Rider is a very good wooden coaster, but my goodness, it gets a long line. If you're there on a summer day and the wait is only an hour, I would consider yourself lucky. This thing gets an insanely long queue time. There's a couple of ways I think you can tackle Ghost Rider. Firstly, if you don't have fast lane, I would probably go here first. It's not a great thing because this is where everyone goes, but it's probably where you're going to find the shortest line of the day. This ride just gets insanely busy. Maybe if you go there in the mid-afternoon, 2-3 o'clock-ish, it has a shorter line. I'm not sure, but I've heard this could work. And logically, it makes sense because people haven't gone back for their last rides of the night yet. The other way you could tackle Ghost Rider is get the fast lane and just use that, and you should be able to get on in less than 20 minutes, give or take. Which is a lot better than the alternative. Okay, here are a couple of touring plans I want to throw out. The first one involves Ghost Rider, and both plans require you to get there at park opening. I think this is crucial in general, but really at a major park like this, it's even more crucial. You're going to get your shortest lines at the beginning of the day. So roughly, here's plan numero uno. You start with Ghost Rider because of all the things I've already mentioned. Then you go to Pony Express, which is a pretty low capacity ride. Then you head over to Berry Tales. This can get busy, and from what I recall, the line for this moves pretty slow. Next, I would go to Silver Bullet and or Timber Mountain Log Ride. Admittedly, there is a flaw with this plan, and the major flaw is that you don't get to Timber Mountain Log Ride until midday, which is not great. This log flume gets very busy, and rightfully so. But if you have the fast lane, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Then in the afternoon, I would do stuff in Camp Snoopy, Fiesta Village, and the Boardwalk. Then if you have the opportunity, do Ghost Rider at night, because it's just amazing at night. And here is plan number 2. This, I think, can work with or without fast lane. I should mention that on the day we used this plan and it was successful, Ghost Rider and Accelerator were not open, so I'm not sure how that would impact this plan, but it's worth keeping in mind. Granted, the park was really dead, and in only 8 hours we did 20 rides, which is kind of insane. So I guess I had the best possible scenario at Knott's in general, but for this plan to work. Anyway, so the plan is you start at hang time and ride that a couple of times before preferably moving on to Accelerator. Obviously, it was closed for us, so we didn't do that. Then move on to Timber Mountain Log Ride. It's great to get on this in the morning before it builds up a line. Even if it might be a little bit chilly, it's worth it. Then I'd recommend checking out Calico Mine Ride, Berry Tales, Pony Express, Silver Bullet, and from there, doing Fiesta Village and Planet Snoopy and other flat rides later in the afternoon. This plan worked best for the hang time aspect of it, partly because I don't think very many people go to the very back corner of the park right after opening. Unfortunately, because of Knott's Berry Farm's year-round operations, you're bound to have a ride closed on every visit, as has been the case for me in my first 2 visits. So we've been talking about the rides, let's get into them more in depth. Let's start with Ghost Rider, which is ultimately the crown and jewel of Knott's Berry Farm. If you were to make a perfect wooden coaster, I think you could take Ghost Rider and add some theming and terrain, because this layout and this ride is so good. The ride is built by Custom Coasters International and has a great mixture of elements, with 2 extremely different halves, the first half featuring mainly big drops and swooping elements, while the second half is low to the ground and bonkers. A backseat ride on Ghost Rider is impeccable because it's also very smooth, and the GCI trains that were put on it a few years back are very comfortable. And a night ride on this is absolutely insane. You feel like you are going to die, in a good way. I also think the ride is a great finale with a crazy lateral filled helix. Airtime, speed, smoothness, laterals, this is just a great wooden roller coaster, and when this ride was closed for me in 2022, it really did feel like the park was missing that elite ride. But Ghost Rider sure does fill that void. Another elite ride is Accelerator, the Intamin launch coaster. These 2 coasters in Knott's Berry Farm's 1-2 punch couldn't be more different, but they're so great nonetheless. Accelerator is very short, but it is very thrilling. The launch, which takes you from 0 to 82 miles an hour in just over 2 seconds, by the way, which is crazy powerful, is my favorite roller coaster element of all time as of now. It feels like you get hit in the back by a semi-truck, in a good way. The top hat also gives terrific airtime. If you're sitting up front, you get it on the way up, and if you're sitting in the back, you get it on the way down. Sustained floater either way. Then the overbanks just give you an opportunity to enjoy the speed. For a prototype, this one is darn good, and I love it. For inversions, your best bet is going to be Silver Bullet, the B&M invert. I think this ride is quite underrated. It's smooth, it's long, it has an intense helix, and some fun inversions. I won't even be too hard on this ride's ramp of a first drop, because the rest of the ride is great, and it was amazing that they fit so much ride into this space. I really enjoy Silver Bullet, and while it isn't an elite ride, it is a satisfying one. Another coaster with lots of inversions is Hang Time. This Gerstlauer has some things going for it, the vertical lift, the beyond vertical drop, and the inversions that follow, plus the great ejector airtime moment. Like Silver Bullet, I would not put this ride in elite territory, but I'd put it in the very fun territory. The lap bar restraints are also great, because while you feel secure, it allows you to enjoy the ride a little more. Even if this coaster isn't butter smooth, you don't really have to worry about headbanging, well, you don't at all, because of those restraints. I thought this was a great addition to Knott's because even though Emperor is now open at SeaWorld San Diego, there still really isn't anything too similar to this ride in California. Montezuma's Revenge is a classic. And I found the old iteration of the ride to be very fun with the vertical loop, 2 spikes, and the launch. So why do I say old iteration? Well, the ride just underwent and is still undergoing a huge refurb, which will change the ride experience. Which is why I'm pretty much going to move on because the ride experience is going to be changed anyway, so why talk about it that much? However, I will say it was a fun shuttle coaster, no doubt. For family coasters, Knott's has a good amount, my favorite of the bunch being Sierra's Sidewinder. This mock spinner looks tame, but don't be fooled, there are some surprisingly intense moments. It's a little shaky in parts from what I recall, but the spinning is quite fun. And while we've stuck away from making our ride vehicle super unbalanced, I know if you do, it can get absolutely wild with how much you spin. Overall though, I definitely recommend experiencing Sierra Sidewinder. I think it's a great little spinner. And in addition to being fun, this coaster serves as a great standout attraction in the park's kids area. Pony Express is fun, but admittedly flawed. This ride is extremely short, but before we get to that, let's look at some of the positives. I do like the motorbike seating setup. I think if it didn't have that, then there really wouldn't be anything going for this ride, but with that, I do enjoy it. And it's pretty smooth too, but the length is hard to look past. This coaster is over in an absolute flash. This is one of those scenarios where I think this ride would benefit greatly from an extra 10 seconds of ride time, even if that's not really possible logistically speaking. A ride that isn't short, however, is Jaguar, the Zier coaster. This isn't a bad ride at all, and it has the best themed queue in the entire park. Located in a pyramid, I really think they did some good stuff in the queue line. I also find this ride kinda humorous though, from the extremely long train to just some weird elements throughout. Take for example the last part of the ride after the second lift hill, where there's a long straight section, a turnaround, and then another long straight section right next to the other one. As I said, not bad, just kinda funny. This monorail disguised as a coaster does a good job showing you some things in the park. It's really more like a scenic journey than a thrill ride. And you know, that's alright with me. The final family coaster we should talk about is... do I want to talk about it? Coast Rider. No, not Ghost Rider, Coast Rider. I actually enjoy most Wild Mouse coasters with the laterals and drops, but not this one. You wanna know why? Couple reasons. Firstly, shin guards. Your shins will come off this ride in serious pain. They will be screaming at you asking, "Why did you ride Coast Rider? I was doing just fine before." The other reason that this ride isn't great is all the trim brakes. Even the big drop at the beginning can't save how slowly you go through the rest of the layout. Typically, I can see the good sides in a roller coaster, but this is one of those situations that this ride is just not good at all. I guess it looks good sitting there on the midway, but it's just not a great experience. The park's kiddie coaster is Timberline Twister, which I gotta say is a pretty aggressive little ride. I actually got airtime on one of the hills, so take that as you will. In some ways, this ride might just be better than Coast Rider. Knott's Berry Farm does a great job at non-coaster rides too. Let's start with some of the more major ones and the water rides. When talking about the water rides at Knott's Berry Farm, there is one ride you start with and one ride only, Timber Mountain Log Ride. I think behind Ghost Rider, this is the next best ride in the park. It's that good. Is it as good as Splash Mountain? Well, no, let's not get crazy, but it is a very good ride. First of all, the rock work is very good, and while the drops are just okay for the most part, the theming is really what drives this ride over the top. There's some great scenes and great animatronics throughout, my favorite being the forest scene. Honestly, my biggest problem with this ride is how fast you move through the water. I wish you had more time to appreciate all the little details. I guess that just gives me an excuse to ride it more, and you don't even get too wet on it either. It's pretty much the perfect log flume. Almost. Not quite. Very good though. There's also Calico River Rapids. I haven't ridden this attraction, so I can't really speak to it that much, but it does look like a pretty solid rapids ride, and there's some theming along the course as well. I think this and Timber complement each other perfectly as a great water ride duo for Knott's Berry Farm. And I think that's something that flies under the radar in a theme park, having a good water ride collection, especially when it gets warm like it does in Southern California. So good on you, Knotts. For dark rides, you have two. Calico Mine Ride feels like a classic ride because it is, just like Timber Mountain Log Ride. It's very interesting because you sit in this long train and go into the mine, and then you see some huge impressive sets. It's very cool and different than any other dark ride you'll ride in all likelihood. I really recommend giving this oldie but a goodie a go because it's still a fun attraction to this day. The other dark ride you can find at Knott's Berry Farm is Knott's Berry Tales, Return to the Fair. This is an interactive shooting dark ride that I think is great. It is screen-based, but it just feels so Knott's. Journey to the Iron Reef never made sense, so I'm glad they refurbished it into Knott's Berry Tales. I also really like the little gun widget, that looks really cool. Overall, I think this is a great dark ride for the park because it is completely different than any other ride at the park. It's a fun little ride, and it has air conditioning as well, which can be coveted in the hotter months. For flat rides, Knott's Berry Farm has a pretty solid collection, and in my opinion, it's headlined by Supreme Scream. This trio of S&S drop towers doesn't give any airtime, but it does provide some positive G's at the bottom of the plunge, and it gives a great view. Also, and this may just be me making up things, but it feels like this gets to the top of the tower faster than some of the Intamin drop towers do, for example. Overall, solid attraction, and I think you should give it a shot. But not to worry, there's plenty of other flat rides, extreme or family friendly, throughout the park. Even with Supreme Scream, I don't think Knott's has a super standout-ish flat ride, but they have a very solid collection all around. Which I think is just as good as having one main standout flat ride. Finally, while Knott's Berry Farm doesn't have any transportation rides, they do have some sightseeing rides. I think my favorite has got to be the train out of the bunch, even if it's not the most unique, just because at one point robbers come onto the train, and that's really funny. They really interact and do a good job there. It's things like this that set Knott's Berry Farm apart for me. And speaking of unique experiences, they have a stagecoach with real horses. Like, what? I have never seen that at any theme park but here. And it gives some cool vantage points as well, so it's just a cool overall experience. Now, you should know with this one, Fastlane is not available, and due to the fact that they are using real horses, the ride is not open all day, so check the operating schedule on the day of your visit. And finally, there's also a little Ferris wheel as well. So if you couldn't tell, Knott's Berry Farm has a lot of rides and a lot of good ones too. But ultimately, there's more to Knott's Berry Farm than these rides alone. Knott's Berry Farm has 4 different lands, the crown jewel being Ghost Town. The atmosphere in this area is unparalleled when it comes to Cedar Fair parks. Granted, this wasn't really Cedar Fair's doing, but they've done a great job to keep the area as good as it is. I could seriously spend all day in this one section, especially because Ghost Rider's there. It's amazing all around. The second land in the park is the Boardwalk. For the most part, I think this is probably the weakest land when it comes to theming at Knott's. Because, well, there pretty much isn't any, but it looks nice. Planet Snoopy is one of my new favorite kids areas. I really like what they did here. There is shade everywhere, and there are plenty of rides to be enjoyed by both parents and their kids. I also absolutely love the entrance to the land with Snoopy on the boat with the waterfall. I just think that's so awesome. There's also some little interactive things in Planet Snoopy, which I think is great. I just love this kids area. The final land is Fiesta Village. This is the smallest land, and you can find Montezuma's Revenge, Jaguar, and a bunch of flat rides here. It's a pretty cool section, it's just not as expansive as something like Ghost Town. And finally, relating to food, I think Knott's Berry Farm's food collection is just alright outside of the chicken dinner restaurant. With all of that being said, do I recommend visiting Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California? Absolutely. This is an unreal theme park. I think I like it more than most, and I think I like it more than I should, but I just have no problems with this park. It's just so great. Even the operations haven't been that bad on my visits, and I know some people thought they were pretty terrible. This park basically just does everything well, I think. From rides, to theming, to shows that I didn't really get to experience, this place is awesome. I'm very thankful that I've been able to visit this park a couple of times recently, because it's just so good. Definitely recommend a visit if you can get there. Even if your only opportunity to go is during some sort of seasonal event, I think that's a great idea. Go anyway. I think a visit is better than no visit to this park. But anyways, I've been talking long enough, so thank you all for watching. See you all next time. Make sure to take a trip to Knott's Berry Farm if you can, because I highly doubt that you'll regret it.